Now, in the midst of all of this fighting and all of this political disagreement, foreign political interests are also at play in Ukraine. Congressman Rohrabacher slammed his colleagues this week for taking sides in the turmoil. He says no one knows for sure who started the violence in Ukraine and accused the protesters of using, quote, brute force. Representative Rohrabacher is the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs panel on Europe, and he joins me now to explain his position. Congressman Rohrabacher, thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time to sit down with us. I first want to get your take on the protesters because it's different from many of your other colleagues in Congress. Why are they being presented, in your opinion, as peaceful protesters in the mainstream media? Is that how you see them?
Well, they represent a large segment, excuse me, of the Ukrainian population. But we have to remember, Ukraine is a very divided country. You have about half the country really wants closer relations with Russia, and the other half of the country wants closer relations, more of a European tilt to their country. These are two diametrically opposed positions, and people feel very strongly about it. Well, these type of issues should be settled at the ballot box. And I'm just wondering, first of all, what is this idea about having foreign countries have to sign off to an agreement between Ukrainians themselves? That's kind of odd that this government and that government signed off on the agreement. This should be left up to the people, and it should be settled not on the streets, but in the ballot by balloting. And if they didn't like what their government was doing, they should kick them out in the next election. I'm just wondering that no matter who wins the next election, whether this president means now, if you feel really strongly about it, you're willing to really get out in the streets and risk losing your lives, you can force any position onto the Ukrainian government. That would mean there'd be a lot of turmoil in the future.
And as you say, we are seeing these diametrically opposing opinions playing out in the streets with this crazy violence that's going on. Now, Senators John McCain and Chris Murphy traveled to Kiev in December. Senator Murphy said, quote, Ukraine's future stands with Europe and the U.S. stands with Ukraine, while Senator McCain proclaimed, quote, America stands with you. Do you think that this kind of speech is appropriate?
No, I don't. And I think that it's up to the Ukrainian people to decide what is in their best interest. And yes, the Russians, by the way, what it is there's a lot of people in the Republican Party who are still treating Russia as if it was the Soviet Union. The Cold War is over. Putin decided that he would like to have, and of course, there's no reason why he shouldn't be representing the interests of Russia. He is the president of Russia. He offered the Ukrainians a deal, and if they wouldn't go towards the European direction, well, okay. They have a right to accept or reject that. Their government has a right to accept or reject it without having us trying to say, well, if you accept any closer ties with Russia, that must mean you're a puppet and you're corrupt and you're a gangster. Well, the United States, that's really interfering locally with what the Ukrainians should be deciding for themselves.
And I understand that President Obama actually called President Vladimir Putin today. Do you think that call even should have taken place?
Well, I don't know what he was talking about, and it would be nice if Mr. Putin and the United States were both dedicated to getting back to the democratic process and allowing elections to happen and allowing people who are elected to make the decisions for that country. In this case, I don't see a dichotomy. I don't see Mr. Putin opposing that, and that should be our position as Americans. That we believe in the democratic process. So I just, Mr. Putin is demonized by a lot of people here, and when he's ever watching out for Russia's self-interest, we're acting as if this is the old Cold War days and it was a communist overture to do something to dominate the world. Well, Putin has a right to watch out for the interests of the people there, just as the way we do in the United States, and just as the Ukrainian government should be doing, watching out for the interests of the people of Ukraine.
So it all boils down to business is essentially what you're saying. Now, Let's talk about this peace deal. You say that if Ukraine wants to have peace, then they should go to the ballot boxes and do it there. Now, with this new deal, they're saying they're calling for early elections for presidential elections by December. Does this peace deal undermine the democratically elected government, since essentially it reverses the Constitution and forces early elections? I mean, what kind of a message does it send to protesters? Does it say that if they go to the streets and riot, that they will get what they want?
Well, and they went to the streets. They don't necessarily, we don't know whether they went to the streets and rioted or not. There's a lot of evidence to indicate that people were being shot, that the authorities, once they were in the streets, started brutalizing them. There's that evidence, and but also there's evidence that there are hotheads among the people who are demonstrating, and that they all weren't as peaceful as is being portrayed, and victims as they are being portrayed. The most important thing, however, is the rule of law. And yes, human rights have to be protected. People have a right to demonstrate and express their opposition to government policy. But also we have the rule of law to think about, that when a government is elected, it should be that is the group of people who are elected to make decisions. They're the ones who should set the policy. Now, what we've learned in Ukraine now, if it looks like it, you can, if you really disagree with what the elected government's doing, you should go to the streets and just raise holy hell until those policies are reversed or until there's some change made in the procedure. Well,
so certainly,
that's not going to lead to peace in the Ukraine in the future.
So certainly guilt does lie on both sides, and we don't really know right now who has insinuated this kind of chaos that we're seeing play out in the streets. And we don't have too much time left, but we've seen in the last few years massive demonstrations happen throughout the Arab world, recently in Turkey and Bahrain. We've seen them play out in the European Union with austerity riots. We've even seen them here in the U.S. with the Occupy movement. What's the appropriate response from governments to movements that happen like this and are taken out to the streets?
Well, the important thing is that all people in these countries, whether it's the United States or elsewhere, these people have a right to demonstrate. They don't have a right to blockade streets or to occupy territory, but they have a right to protest and to express themselves and their opposition to government policies as aggressively as they can without stepping on the rights of others. And you know, in the United States, if you have an Occupy movement, the only thing wrong with that is they were occupying territory and sitting down and saying, oh, we control this now. Well, as long as people are just in parks and having protest meetings and things like that without actually taking possession of a given part of town, those rights need to be protected. But at the same time, elected government, that principle that the elected people, see, you can be a very small minority and still get hundreds of thousands of people out. So the right of the majority to elect its government and set policies shouldn't be stepped on either.
Congressman Dana Rohrabacher from California, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you come back again.
Thank you.